Welcome to the Purple Political Breakdown. How's it going? How's your day been? And we are back with another episode of the podcast as I break down the most important news of the recent week, the topics that you need to know, the topics you need to be informed of and be ready to converse about. This is the Purple Political News. So today we got some really interesting topics that I feel like a lot of you guys will gain something out of. Of course, I'm gonna have to touch upon the recent stuff for Israel and Palestine, and I'll touch upon that probably finally, like last, because it's the stuff that everybody's talking about. It's gonna have huge ramifications moving forward, and it's probably something I'm gonna be covering at least pretty much every single week. I'll be honest, because something crazy tends to happen every week, to be honest, every single day regarding that conflict. But before we dive into that, let's dive into some other topics that I think you should know about. The first bit of news that I want to cover today, of course, is in reference to the Supreme Court hearing argument on regarding the states of Florida and Texas on banning social media platforms from basically removing political content, political opinions in general, right? They are afraid that certain platforms, more specifically platforms like X or Twitter for Meta, Facebook, Instagram, all those platforms are more willing to ban conservative content on their platform. They think they're basically out to get them. The problem with this, obviously, is very, very much layered, right? I'm not even going to go to the kind of validity of the claim, but more so the ambiguity of the case, because the Supreme Court is listening to this argument. And the biggest thing that they're trying to point out is, does the First Amendment truly protect this? We know what the First Amendment is, right? The freedom of speech. And that's the big thing of contention here, because that amendment, more specifically, is to give you the freedom of speech from the state, from the federal, the government. The contentious point here is that the social media companies are private entities. Now, eventually, Twitter is going to try to announce itself as a public platform like Elon Musk said he was going to do. But as of right now, it's a private platform. Meta is a private platform. Instagram, private platform. So, does this First Amendment right hold the same validity towards these entities? Right. So that is the big talking point. Even conservative Supreme Court justices don't know if the First Amendment truly is abided or truly should be utilized in this case, because the ramifications down the line could be very questionable. Some of the quotes that they said is, and this is more specifically in regards to Florida that I'm going to be talking about, but they asked, could Florida enact a law telling bookstores that they have to put everything out by alphabetical order and that they can't organize or put some things closer to the front of the store that they think, their customers will want to buy? The reason why this one is important, and I have another quote as well, is once you go down the line where the First Amendment, and more specifically, what you deem as political rhetoric or political opinions, are kind of being overshadowed for whatever instance, you go down a slippery road when it comes to other private entities that give out information. Right. So one thing that I noticed right off the bat, like if we're talking about social media first, is that, okay, what happens if someone thinks that this one person is spewing anti-Semitic rhetoric? And I'm going to go to the extremes for a reason, because this is why it's such a shady thing. Okay, they put anti-Semitic rhetoric on the platform on X. X doesn't want that on their platform. It's hate speech, as people say. They want to get rid of it. Or what if it's something in regards to the R word? Because political content doesn't have a very specific definition. Political content tends to basically be opinions about the most controversial and societal impactful topics that exist, and it can go to some of the most uncomfortable conversations that exist as of right now in the United States. I mean, how many abortion conversations have you been hearing? How many anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic conversations have you been hearing? How many conversations have you been hearing regarding pedophilia? All of this at the end of the day follows under the umbrella of political opinions and political rhetoric. Like, what if someone starts spewing Nazi rhetoric? Again, a political opinion. So again, it gets shady. Is this the type of thing that we want to allow? Is this the type of thing that we want to be protected on a platform like Twitter, like Instagram? It's one thing for the government not to get involved, of course, but it's one thing for a private entity to be forced to showcase certain things that they deem unreasonable, nasty, downright hateful on their platform, a platform that gives out information, a platform that people come to converse and basically hang around, right? So in terms of the audience, in terms of the consumers that are gaining something out of the social media platform, we know that this type of rhetoric is going to make them walk away. Like, I can speak to you conservatives, right? There is certain things that I'm sure you don't want, and I know you're trying to win a point. And please don't try to win a point here. Be honest with yourself. I'm gonna touch into your emotions. I'm gonna touch into your realism. If you have a child that is 16 years old, you're conservative, you're relatively religious too, would you want them to go on a platform that is spewing Nazi rhetoric right in front of them because it's protected by the First Amendment speech? Would you want them to go on a platform that's endorsing pedophilia? Because we know some very radical leftists are saying that this is a sexual orientation. Would you want them to do these things? I'm sure the answer is no. No, you don't. Because it can get very nasty out there, right? So that's social media. That's the great part when it comes to social media and the type of content that is getting pushed in front of people. But then, just like my quote indicated just earlier, if we start extending that in terms of limitations of political opinion, what to say that bookstores can't do that? What to say that a bookstore owner is going out of his way to put certain books in front of the consumers, but a conservative walks by and says, nah, you're limiting the conservative content. My political opinion is being overshadowed. I need you to put those books in the front. Can they do that? Because it follows the same level of thought, correct? But it doesn't seem right. It seems wrong for a reason. But let's keep on going. There's another quote that I want you to hear. When it comes to the freedom of speech, could the Florida law prevent Gmail from deleting or sending to spam emails sent by political commentators such as Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow that is sent to them, and you basically have to accept the information because it's a political opinion? This is a different platform. It's not social media. It's not a bookstore. It's your email. But you don't want this information flooding your inbox. You don't want this information entering your inbox. So why shouldn't you be able to junk it? Why shouldn't you be able to block it? It gets dicey because political opinions are so vague in general, but there is certain information as an individual work using a platform for innate privacy, to be honest, that you're forced to accept political rhetoric. That seems like a step over the bounds of the government. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. We don't want the government getting more power, right? More control, right? The federal government, the state government can't limit us as people. But at the same time, when it comes to political content, even though I do think people should be more politically informed, it shouldn't be shoved in your face in every situation if you don't want it. And the dangerous material, damn sure shouldn't be shoved in your face. So another thing that you have to keep in mind when it comes down to it, is how this plays into Section 230. There's another quote that says, if what we say about this is that this speech that's entitled to First Amendment protection, I do think then that Section 230 implications for another case. And so it's always tricky to write an opinion when you know there might be landmines that would affect things later. We basically have to eliminate certain areas of speech entirely. So we couldn't talk about suicide prevention anymore because we're not going to talk about suicide promotion. I guess we couldn't have pro Semitic speech because we're not going to have anti Semitic speech. Section 230 has a certain level of protection when it comes to social media companies. But if Florida and Texas kind of get this upheld, it really begs a question in terms of the content that will be able to get passed, basically taking a step over Section 230. So this is a interesting case when it comes to banning certain social media political content and whether that should be allowed or at the very least moderating the content to for the people, for the consumers, because we know content moderation happens all the time to ensure that certain things don't get in front of people. And I would argue that we need better content moderation because the amount of porn that is getting poured into the public's face on the internet is actually disgusting. I'll be honest, it's absolutely revolting. But that is all I got for that topic. I'm curious to see your thoughts in regards to it, of course. Let's move on to our next topic in regards to bump stocks and the ban case in regards to bump stocks being banned. So I have a few things that I want to read out to you because, interesting enough, I know you big Second Amendment advocates are big on not allowing the limitation of you being able to shoot a gun for no reason. But let me read this out anyway. I know that's gonna upset you. I need to be nicer to you. I need to be nicer to you. I mean, yeah, I can't. I don't know how to be nicer in this situation because inherently there's some arguments that I hear for the Second Amendment that doesn't make sense to me. But I'm willing to have you on my podcast and converse about it. That's the big thing for me, right? That's the big thing about trying to understand why Second Amendment gun lovers need machine guns. But let's talk about the ban case, the bump stock ban case. So, the Supreme Court case called Garland v. Cargill centers on bump stocks, devices that modify semi automatic rifles to make it easier to shoot hundreds of rounds in quick succession, according to the Washington Post. That this case was actually spearheaded by Trump, believe it or not. The device harnesses a gun's natural recoil, allowing the rifle to bounce or bump rapidly back and forth off a shooter's trigger finger. Rifle equipped with bump stocks can fire an estimated 400 to 800 bullets per minute. Bump stocks have been used in some recent mass shootings, including the 2017 attack on the music festival in Las Vegas that left 60 people dead and hundreds injured. After the music festival shooting, the Trump administration moved to ban bump stocks through the federal rulemaking process. And Justice Clarence Thomas, in regards to this case, noted that the statute was initially passed because of the lethality, that's an interesting word, of machine guns. Behind the latest ban, he said, is the notion that the bump stock does the same exact thing. Now, Justice Samuel A. Alito Jr. asked if he could imagine a legislator thinking Congress should ban machine guns but not bump stocks. Some conservatives, justices, expressed concern about what will happen if the court upholds the ban. Attorneys for the Biden administration said people who currently own bump stocks could be held criminally liable if they didn't realize the ban was in place. Okay. One thing I'm going to point out, right, is that if it does this much damage, I don't see the validity of utilize or allowing bump stocks to exist. I personally don't. One thing that I will point out is how the conservatives were definitely taking a step in regards to this situation, of course. Another thing that I want to point out is I understand worrying about ramifications and worrying about the trickle down effect. I actually talk about it quite a lot. Okay, we take a dip in the water. Moving forward, what will take place regarding gun usage and gun rights? And I can understand the concern because people love their guns. They love their pistols, the shotgun, the machine gun, the sniper. Hey, I get it. To an extent. I don't really get the appeal, but I get the wanting of keeping your gun right. So we do need to make it very crystal clear on the reasoning behind certain cases. And I think they did right here. We unilaterally should be able to agree that a machine gun shouldn't be something used by the public, right? There's really no use for it unless you're in military warfare. Okay, if we understand machine guns shouldn't be used in public or shouldn't even be seen in public unless you're in the military, then also bump stocks who have a very similar rate of fire as machine guns, why shouldn't they also be banned? Is the conversation. We want to limit lethality without taking away rights, but also giving you the ability to protect yourself. Having a machine gun doesn't really give you any inherent advantage to protect yourself that a normal pistol would give you. So I feel like this is a no-brainer for people to understand. Now the ruling is expected to be by the end of June. And I think for the most part, yes, some gun rights activists, okay. Shout out, I think the NRA, the CEO for the NRA got did he get did he get sued or he got in trouble for corruption? That's I'm just gonna say it right there. Hey, if lefties from the BLM could be corrupt, so can righties from the NRA. That's tough. But ultimately, I feel like we should all be in agreement to this conversation at the very least. I get wanting to protect yourself. Your gun rights is a right from the Second Amendment, but we don't need certain things out in society just for your enjoyment, is my biggest case regarding this. But let's move on to our next topic in regards to drunk driving indicators in cars. So there is a kind of movement, and I don't know if it's been passed in any sort of fashion, but there's a movement to potentially include drunk driving indicators in vehicles, more specifically for the individuals who are in trouble, are basically, yeah, in trouble. In trouble. I think that's the best word. But basically was in trouble for drunk driving at some point. And they want to make sure that these people don't have the incentive or even the want to go back in their vehicle and do it again. Because, of course, if they do it again and a cop catches them, they'll get in trouble. But what if they do it again and don't get caught? No go, no go, my boy. So in addition to suspending your driver's license and charging fines, many jurisdictions impose the installation of ignition interlock devices as part of the penalties for drunk driving convictions. They are known as IIDs, which prevent the vehicle from starting if the driver's BRAC exceeds a predetermined limit, usually set below the legal limit for alcohol intoxication. So that is fascinating. And the more and more we make our the one of the most important like technology that a person should have in terms of cars, unless you're kind of working from home, but most people aren't, right? Having it to be more and more safe as time goes by is something that I'm all for. Yes, I can hear that it's a certain invasion of privacy, but for this situation, it seems to be only for people who's already in trouble for drunk driving in the first place. But I would argue moving forward when it comes to technological advantages, why shouldn't there be a situation where you can't drive due to you being drunk? Or at the very least utilize that technology in a way to, okay, you come in your car, you're drunk, instead of getting them in trouble for a non-offender, keep in mind, you call an Uber. It automatically calls an Uber. Or if it's one of those self-driving cars, it goes to the next safest location, safest destination. Matter of fact, maybe you as an individual can set the safety destination of the best place to take you after you're drunk. And it automatically kicks in based off the indicator of your alcohol content level, alcohol level, intoxication level, right? This is a step in direction of a situation that we understand is bad, right? Drunk driving is unanimously bad in society. Some people still kind of take little certain leeways with being a little tipsy, which they shouldn't be. But at the very least, we can understand a safer society is a better society. Let's move on to our next topic. The G7 debate seizing Russian assets. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire, or Marie, I don't know how to pronounce that, on Wednesday publicly challenged U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's view that it would be legal to monetize some $300 billion in frozen Russian assets, revealing deep divisions among group of 7 countries. He said any such move should be fully underpinned by international law and required the support of all members of the group of 20 major economies, which include Russia, China, and other countries that have been critical of the United States. On Tuesday, Yellen told reporters there was a strong international law, economic, and moral case for deriving value from Russian assets, either seizing them outright or using them as collateral, and the countermeasures theory justified such actions under international law. Of course, Russia was not happy about this, and Russia threatened major retaliation if the US and these other countries decided to basically go about their plan in regards to this, of course. Now, the countermeasures theory, from what I'm aware of when I looked it up, I just want to be very sure here. The basic idea of the countermeasures theory is that if a wrongful actor is doing something wrong, then another wrongful actor has a right to take or kind of do what's right in behest of that wrongful actor. So in this situation, the wrongful actors will be the United States doing something that is wrongful in terms of taking their assets, because Russia is doing something that is wrongful first, or even more wrongful in general. So that's the whole entire idea of the countermeasures theory, from what I've seen at the very least. And it's interesting because apparently there are some countries that do believe that there should be a certain level of punishment, a certain level of accountability that Russia has to abide by, considering their actions of invading Ukraine. The big thing of this, of course, is the potentiality of creating unnecessary conflict and actions, causing us to go in more international friction in general. Because China won't be happy about us doing this. Russia said there would be major retaliation. What that retaliation would be, I'm not really sure. But if we are making enemies of not only Russia and China, which we kind of are at the moment, but also make enemies with their kind of allies too, that obviously will bring about huge international conflict. Now, the idea is utilizing these assets to actually help Ukraine, which is very ironic at the end of the day. Should it could be part of the conversation to officially end this ridiculous war between Russia and Ukraine. And maybe that's a strategy that they're kind of thinking about, by laying the seeds that if you keep doing what you're doing, we are going to take your assets and we are going to use these assets to fund Ukraine. It's a threat. It's a very, very, you know what I'm saying, on the table threat, but can Joe Biden pull it off? I'm kind of unsure. I'm curious to see how everything kind of goes about, but it does seem like a very, very, I'm gonna say, terrible risk to kind of do at this moment at time when it comes to Russia and our relationship with them. How this will plan out moving forward, I'm not sure. I believe that a lot of these G7 countries will not agree to it at the end of the day, but the US is the US. So whatever they decide to do, people will follow. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. Next is the Pew Research poll that took place in regards to democracy. So, a couple of information here. In a poll of 24 democratic countries, a nonpartisan fact tank, Pew, said a medium of 77% say representative democracy is a good system of government, higher than any other alternative. A medium of 59% say they are dissatisfied with how democracies work in their country. Where data was available from 2017, democracy's rating as a very good system is down in over half of 22 countries. And half of 22 countries. Sorry about that. A medium of 74% say they don't believe elected officials care what people like them think. Only 10 of the 24 national leaders in the survey have favorable ratings from half or more of the public. In lots of different ways, people are really frustrated with how democracy is performing. There's a real disconnect between people and their representatives. This is interesting to me when it comes down to it. Like, we understand what a representative democracy is. I think the problem is expecting this system to be our saving grace throughout the entirety of human history, which in reality it's not. And not because it's not the best, it still is the best governmental system, but because it's not evolving. And that is my biggest criticism for it. Because over time, you're going to see groups of people, very successful people, very rich people under our capitalist project, and even other situations where people in politics, people in government are going to understand the ins and outs and the nuances of how to take advantage of the system and basically consolidate the power. Democracy is great, right? But it's not truly a representative democracy if it's not hearing the people's voices. Right now, in a system where our vote should truly indicate our wants and needs, you can understand why it feels like people are not getting what they bargained for. The people who truly feel like their voices get heard the most are the very, very rich, or the financially successful individuals, and the people who are very, very much involved regarding the government. Yeah, it makes sense that these people have a lot of power and a lot of resources played into the government. So, of course, they're going to care about it the most. But for the average individual who's trying to live paycheck by paycheck, it's an unrealistic standard to an extent to expect them to be nearly as involved as some of these other people. So not only are there people who know how to take advantage of a system that hasn't really evolved in terms of how the representation is utilized, right? And then you have another group of people that are not technically taking advantage of the system and the ins and outs, but their power and the finances that they have gives them the ability to be much more involved in the political system at the end of the day. So that's why I'm a big advocate for myself of a system of a more powerful third party, a more moderate, powerful third party, and a more representative voting system. I'm a big fan of star voting in particular that truly echoes the thoughts and the feelings of the masses. That is the next step we have to come out of as a representative democracy. We can't just let these two Republican and Democratic parties with the same rich people in their families gaining power over and over and over again, them and their friends and their families. That seems a little bit of not a true representation of the people, but a representation of the elite. And that's a problem. So that is probably the biggest reason why, obviously, you have people like Donald Trump making the government seem like an evil organization. that's not true. But at the very least, we understand where the disdain comes from. Next, we got Alabama lawmakers. They passed a bill to protect in vitro fertilization clinics in wake of the state Supreme Court ruling granting frozen embryos personhood rights. Kind of crazy to me, but I understand the sentiment from those pro-lifers. Alabama's legislator voted Thursday to protect in vitro fertilization (IVF) providers and patients from civil and criminal penalties for damaging or destroying embryos. The move comes as a result of a state court ruling that frozen embryos are now considered children under wrongful death law in Alabama. In light of the ruling, several fertility clinics, including the largest healthcare provider in the state, paused the IVF services for the fear of legal action if frozen embryos stored at their facility were destroyed. This is an interesting situation. Now, I understand that I'm not going to agree with the pro-lifers in terms of how they depict life. And that's fine. We don't necessarily have to agree. Now that Roe v. Wade is given to the rights of the states, it's a very interesting situation, and it will continuously separate the states in terms of their cultural impact on the people. And to be fair, that's fine. It's never should have been a federal government that dictates the culture and the will of the people. It should have always been in the hands of the state. So I'm not, I'm not upset about it by any means. I do think we enter certain risky areas once we expand the definition of what is life, because we consistently will have to put in conditions on what it means to take away life, right? That's the big thing of this conversation, is the taking away of life. You would have to dictate the value of life and which life has more value, which life deserves more punishment. As of right now, what we do understand is that people who die, people who are killed as adults, are different from people who are killed as kids and babies. But ultimately, murder is murder because they're a human adult. Now, once we expand the definition to something like an embryo and maybe even something like a coma patient, we enter a state of situation where we know that inherently the value is not equatable towards an embryo and a person, and a coma patient and a person, but we would have to treat them all exactly the same, because all life is life under God, is what a pro-lifer should probably think at the end of the day. All life is life under God. I'm curious though. When it comes down to situations of all life is life under God, you as an individual could, probably should, repent from any wrongdoings taken upon the life, correct? At what point can we distinguish how we act towards a life as being treated as differently from the different stages of what life is? Where does that value system come from? I'm curious. And I'm not trying to kind of downplay anything that you believe in as a pro-lifer. My current value system is not equatable to yours. It's more of a question that I'm asking to really understand how you will be able to enforce this consistently. How you'll be able to truly say with your heart of hearts that an embryo dying is the same as a person dying. It'll be interesting to see what I ask you when I confront you. I go like, I know you want to save this life, but what are you doing to take care of this one? I know you want this life to live. Well, we all should live a fruitful life. The purpose of life is to be lived. It's not just to live, but to be lived. What are you doing? What steps are you taking to ensure that life should be lived properly? How should we treat an embryo as a person? How should we treat a child as a person? How should we treat an adult, a granny, a leftist, a trans, a porn star? There's different titles, and I know for a fact that these pro-lifers, some of them have disdain, have hatred. They don't have that same type of love in their heart for certain types of people. How do you care so much about an embryo, but bury in your heart so much about another person? I'm trying to understand, because I don't pretend to be a saint. I don't pretend to be empathetic to all people, nor do I pretend to be sympathetic to all people. I know where my values lie. I know what I have to do, and I know how I treat people. I have a system of morals, and I believe that all life is not treated equal. It never has been. That is my belief. And we need to understand how you need to treat these different types of life. But if we are arguing all life is treated equal, then what are you doing to treat all life equal? Is my question to you as a pro-lifer. So, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, speaking of life and the value of life, we have our final topic of the day in reference to the Israel and Palestinian conflict. Now, this conflict took place for so long, has been taking place for so long, and we have yet another disaster that seems to have happened. Let me read off some of the important stuff for you guys here. So, Israel is facing a lot of scrutiny for recent actions. China and Turkey joined Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan on Friday in condemning Israeli forces for firing on Palestinians waiting for the delivery of aid in Gaza the previous day, with its foreign ministry calling the event yet another crime against humanity. We will all ask for explanations, and there will be an independent probe to determine what happened, said the French foreign minister in regards to this event. China's foreign minister spokesperson Mao Ning said Beijing was shocked and strongly condemned the killing of civilians, adding a call for the relevant parties, especially Israel, to cease fire and end the fighting immediately. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza said more than 100 people were killed and at least 700 wounded, bringing the overall death total in the Gaza Strip to more than 30,000. So the response from Israel is that they were trying to protect themselves from the hundreds to thousands of people potentially trying to do harm to the soldiers. There's apparently a very edited grainy drone video is kind of the marker, the qualification regarding the video, where lots of people were kind of bombarding the humanitarian aid trucks that were trying to feed the people, of course. And for some reason, the lives of the Israeli soldiers felt threatened enough to open fire. The President Biden called it a tragic and alarming incident, and he spoke with the leaders of Egypt and Qatar again regarding the situation. Let me be very clear. Of course, some of these countries that have always been kind of enemies of the United States and the West, they're going to play into the appeal to the people. And I only could buy what they're saying to so much of an extent, right? Like China, for example. Well, one thing I think we can clearly say is that this is a terrible situation. It's hard to really know what is the right answer because take out your bias. I know a lot of you guys are feeling something, but take away the emotion a little for a second. I'm going to lay out two scenarios for you. The first scenario is that there were a truck with food to give out to the civilians. There were soldiers near the truck, surrounding the truck, and they were handing out food. And out of nowhere, they just started charging at them. Maybe they were saying some terrible things. Maybe they were saying death to Israel. Maybe this was an opportunity. They were charging at the people. They kept on telling them to go stand back. They wouldn't listen. And then you had to do what you had to do to survive. That's scenario one. Scenario two is that there's the truck, there's the soldiers, there's the people doing whatever it takes to get the food, doing whatever it takes to survive, considering the situation, knowing that the people that have been killing you for so long, knowing that they're there, and you're just doing whatever you can to get in the front, get the resources because we're suffering. And then one of the soldiers thought, started panicking, got a little wild, trigger happy, and fired, causing the rest to fire. Or there could have been a third situation where this is all ploy and Israel wanted to take out a lot of Palestinians. Each of them is a plausible situation. Each of them is a plausible scenario. And I think we need to recognize that without knowing for sure what has happened, it's hard to really understand the circumstance. One thing I can say for sure, there is really no excuse to open that fire on the people like that. It's very little, in my opinion, considering the PR, right? Israel has been very much killing a lot of people. A lot of people have not been happy with Israel's certain situation. Certain things that Netanyahu has said is that he wanted to destroy Hamas and he wanted to push into Rafah. And he didn't care how he did it. He wanted to eliminate Hamas for good. Yeah, I understand Hamas is a bad organization, but the vitriol, the aggression, the unwillingness for the ceasefire, it made people question what his true motives are. And then you have a situation where there's certain controversy spewing up left and right, of course, with the little girl who got shot. And then you have this giving out humanitarian aid, putting yourself in this situation, knowing a lot of people are going to be pissed off at you, thousands that are suffering, and you didn't have the control, you didn't have the wherewithal, you didn't have the preparedness to know that, okay, if these people get upset, we'll make this as efficient as possible and ensure that doesn't happen. No, you didn't do any of that. You didn't try it hard enough to make sure that the civilians don't get the opportunity to retaliate. You know, as a leader of people, you know, as a former military man, that the civilians don't see you guys as heroes. The civilians don't see you guys as saviors. And maybe you don't know that. But maybe Netanyahu is delusional, thinking that he is the savior of the Palestinian civilians, and went in there thinking that they're just going to stay calm the entire time. It's unfortunate, ladies and gentlemen. It is very Very unfortunate that this took place. And honestly, the more and more aggression that Israel proceeds to do, the less and less support that they will continue to have. This is a step in the wrong direction for sure. But that's all I got for today's podcast episode. This is the purple political news. I do hope you guys enjoyed all the points that were made, my personal opinions regarding the situations. Stay tuned for the next podcast episode. You can watch and read and view and listen to all my content on my website, www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com. If you want to reach out to me, my email is also in the description and on my website, the TrentGoldenFaith@gmail.com. But I appreciate you. We'll be back. Rate us 5 stars if you did enjoy. You have a good one. Take care and peace.